Community service was the final blow. The court assigned Margaret to the county maintenance program, scrubbing park bathrooms, repainting benches, picking up trash along Pinewood roads. I caught sight of her a week later, in an orange reflective vest, broom in hand, sweeping the sidewalk near Pine Crest Park, where she'd once held meetings slandering me. Her curled blonde hair was a mess, face smudged, no more pricey perfume. Some kids biked by yelling, "Hey, where's the house burner lady?" She turned away, but one shouted, "Don't sweep trash with gas." I sat in my patrol car, watching, not laughing, just seeing the end she brought on herself. Henry Cole told me he saw her scrubbing park toilets the day before, muttering about injustice. Lisa said she painted benches with shaky hands, and Sam chuckled when he saw her picking up beer cans near his farm. Margaret didn't go down easy. Linda told me she filed an appeal with the state court, a 5-page handwritten rant calling me a political enemy, and claiming she was framed. She begged Horizon Realty to testify, but the suit who'd measured with her refused. They'd bailed on Pinewood the day she was sentenced. I had the footage, boot prints, fine letters. Her appeal went nowhere. The state judge tossed it in a week, and every agency she contacted shut her down. Her name was trash, no paper but the Pinewood Gazette mentioned her, and even they called her a failed con artist. I heard from Sam that Margaret's family, siblings in Charlotte, cut ties after the case. She'd bragged about high society connections, but now no one wanted the stench. Once she tried rallying former Pinecrest members at the park, but only 2 showed, and they left when she started blaming me. Her fake HOA dissolved, no more fine letters, no more signs, just ashes like my old lodge. I drove by the park another day, saw her sitting alone on a freshly painted bench, clutching her old clipboard, staring into space. No arrogance left, just an empty shell. Margaret crashed, not just from money or punishment, but because she lost everything she'd built on lies. I didn't feel joy, I felt relief. She couldn't threaten Henry, Lisa, Sam, or my dad's land anymore. But I wasn't done. I wanted to rebuild, not just the house but the Pinewood spirit she nearly broke. Margaret Hensley had fallen, no more Pinecrest mansion, no more fake HOA, just a pathetic figure sweeping trash in an orange vest. But I didn't stop at watching her fail. I wanted to rebuild, not just my dad's hunting lodge, but the piece she nearly stole from Pinewood. The old house's ashes still sat there, black amid the Smoky Mountains forest, a reminder that Margaret couldn't destroy my dad's legacy forever. I took the insurance money, not the full $1.2 million she owed, but enough to start. I called Henry Cole, Lisa Monroe, Sam Turner, the ones who'd stood with me against her, and said we're starting over. I got to work that spring, when snow melted on Pinewood's hills. Henry, 75 and all, showed up with his old truck, hauling fresh oak from the local sawmill. "Not letting that Margaret win, Jack," he said, saw in hand, eyes sharp like his Vietnam days. Sam brought his tractor, helped me level the ground, grinning, "This time I ain't letting nobody pitch a wedding tent on your corn." Lisa brought her 2 kids, they played nearby while she helped me hammer the new foundation. I didn't rebuild it exact, some things like the bear head, or my dad's carved shotgun, can't be replaced, but I made it better. Fireproof wood, reinforced steel frame, solar panels on the roof. If Margaret or anyone tried burning it again, they'd be out of luck. Every day, I worked from dawn, when fog hugged the woods, to late night, when owls hooted in the pines. Some days rain leaked through the unfinished roof, soaking me, but I didn't quit. Henry told hunting stories from my dad's time, reminding me of nights by the fire pit with him. Sam brought beer from Rusty Nail, sat with me on the lumber pile, talking next season's corn. Lisa cooked cornbread, said Pinewood needs this, Jack, not just for you, but for all of us. I nodded. She was right. The house wasn't just mine anymore, it was for the community Margaret had tormented. I built a stone fire pit out front, using rocks from Pine Creek where my dad fished. I remembered his words, "Keep the fire burning, Jack." I did just that. The new pit wasn't just for warmth, but for gathering. One night, when the roof was nearly done, I lit it, invited Henry, Lisa, Sam over. We sat around, drank beer, ate cornbread, laughed about Margaret sweeping trash in orange. Henry said. She thought she was queen, now she's scrubbing toilets. Lisa smiled. That's justice. Sam slapped my shoulder. You made your dad proud, Jack. I stared at the flames, saw my dad's shadow in them, not speaking, just smiling. I carved a new wooden sign, like my dad used to, set it at the entrance, Ramsey Lodge. But I added a line with a wood-burning pen, Margaret proof, since 2025. I hung it up, stood back, smirked. Dad would have liked that jab too. The house wasn't just a home, it was a statement that no one could take what's Pinewood's. I planted wild flowers around the old foundation, letting the forest reclaim what Margaret broke. Each sprout was a reminder she lost, we won. When it was done, I stood on the new porch, looking out at the sprawling pines. No more wedding tents, no more fine letters, just Smoky Mountains air and wind. Henry, Lisa, Sam stayed that night to celebrate, bringing lawn chairs and grilled venison. Word spread, others came, Jim from Pinewood Fuel, Linda from the county office, even a few who'd signed Margaret's petition against me under pressure. They apologized, I just grinned. Forget it. Beer? We sat by the fire pit, laughter echoing, like Pinewood was breathing again after a nightmare. The new lodge wasn't just a house, it was proof we're tougher than Margaret thought. I watched the fire, thought of Dad, knew he'd be pleased. But I wasn't done. I wanted Pinewood to remember this lesson forever, and I had a way to make sure of it. The new hunting lodge, Ramsey Lodge, stood strong amid the Smoky Mountains forest, the wooden sign, Margaret proof, since 2025, hanging at the entrance, like a victory banner. I sat on the new porch, coffee in hand, watching mist drift through the pines like smoke, but this time, it didn't carry the smell of burning or loss. Margaret Hensley was history. No Pine Crest mansion, no fake HOA, just a sorry shadow sweeping trash in orange. I'd rebuilt not just my dad's house, but the Pinewood spirit she nearly shattered. Henry, Lisa, Sam, we all stood up, and I wanted to ensure this lesson never faded. I didn't think much about Margaret anymore. Now and then, I'd catch her in the Pinewood Gazette, another appeal denied, or her arguing with kids mocking her while scrubbing park bathrooms. She lost it all, house, car, family, reputation, a fair price for burning my dad's legacy, and harassing my neighbors. I didn't gloat, I'm not that guy. 22 years in the military taught me real victory isn't bragging, it's holding what matters. For me that's this land, this community, and the memory of my dad by the fire pit. Pinewood changed after Margaret. Folks opened up, no longer scared of fine letters or clipboards. This year's county fair was bigger than ever. I saw Henry selling eggs, Lisa bringing cornbread for the kids, Sam showing off a new tractor. No one calls Pine Crest a jewel anymore. It's just a regular neighborhood, free of Margaret or Horizon Realty's shadow. I'm still sheriff, keeping things steady, settling cow disputes, hauling drunks home from Rusty Nail. But now on patrol, folks wave more, smile more, like the Smoky Mountains air got lighter. I spend more time at Ramsey Lodge than before. Mornings, I hunt deer in the woods, hearing wind instead of fire alarms. Nights I sit by the stone fire pit, watching flames dance, thinking of Dad, who taught me patience, grit, and to hold this land at all costs. I planted wildflowers around the old foundation, letting the forest reclaim what Margaret broke. I remade Dad's memorial bench, stained it dark, bolted it to the ground. No one's uprooting it again. Sometimes I wonder if I'd nabbed Margaret the first time she knocked with that clipboard, would it have gone different? Maybe. But I'm glad I waited, not just to punish her, but to show Pinewood you can't bully folks forever without paying. One day, new folks moved in near my land, a young family from Knoxville, seeking quiet. They stopped by, asked about the lodge, and what happened with the HOA around here. I laughed, pointed to the woods. Let's just say they picked the wrong guy to mess with. I offered them coffee, sat on the porch, told them about Margaret, from the stinking wedding tent to the fire footage, from the arrest to the orange vest she wears now. They cracked up when I got to flipping the manure spreader, asked for real. I nodded. Real as this house standing here. I didn't embellish, the truth was good enough. That's how I want Pinewood to remember. No fake rules, no petty fines, just neighbors living real with each other. Margaret thought she could win with sham power, but she didn't get the Smoky Mountains. Here land and people outlast any clipboard. She lost because she didn't know I was sheriff, didn't know I'd wait for the right moment to strike back. If she'd left me alone, respected boundaries not hers. She'd still have her mansion and BMW, but she wanted it all, and lost it all. I sipped my coffee, looked at the pines. Peace, the thing Dad built, the thing I kept. Pinewood's home, and I'll protect it, like I did with Margaret. This story isn't just mine, it's all of ours here. The story reflects very real issues in American life today, especially the tension between individual rights, community, and those who abuse power in small organizations like HOAs, homeowners associations. In the U.S., HOAs often exist to maintain property values and neighborhood order, but it's not rare for them to be exploited by people like Margaret Hensley, a figure embodying arrogance and personal ambition over law. Margaret forging HOA bylaws, threatening neighbors like Henry with coop fines, or Lisa with a kiddie pool, and plotting to steal Jack's land for Horizon Realty highlight a reality: unchecked power can turn into a tool of oppression. Meanwhile, Jack Ramsey, a patient ex-Marine, dedicated sheriff, shows a classic American spirit, defending private property and community against unjust overreach, like when he methodically gathered evidence from camera footage, tire tracks, to find letters. The lesson from this story applies straight to real U.S. life today: be patient and use the legal system to fight injustice, not emotions. Jack didn't rush to arrest Margaret when she first knocked with her clipboard. He waited, planned and used footage, plus Henry, Lisa and Sam's testimonies, to take her to court, an approach reflecting America's rule of law value. In modern life, facing Margaret's overbearing bosses, power-tripping neighbors, or overreaching groups, don't react rashly. Learn from Jack, document proof like his cameras, find allies, like his community, and trust the legal process, like his warrant. Finally, Jack rebuilding Ramsey Lodge with Pinewood's help reminds us that united communities are the greatest strength, a core American value from pioneer days to now. Protect what's yours, but don't forget to stand with neighbors to hold it firm. If you liked the story of how me and Pinewood took down Margaret and rebuilt from the ashes, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next battles. Thanks for joining me, and see you in the next video with more Smoky Mountains drama. When I arrived, thick black smoke billowed into the sky like a funeral shroud. Flames roared high, licking the porch roof. My dad once patched, swallowing the wall with the black bear head he shot when I was 10. Wood cracked like gunfire, acrid smoke stung my nose, windows shattered, glass clattering to the ground, frames warping red hot. Firefighters ran back and forth, hoses blasting, but I knew it was too late. I stood there, 20 feet from the wreckage, sweat mixing with smoke soaking my shirt, teeth grinding until my jaw ached. The deer head from my first hunt, the shotgun with my name carved, all ash. The chimney stood alone amid the blaze, like a tombstone for 30 years of my dad's work. Mike Evans walked over, helmet under his arm, face smudged with soot. "Jack," he said, voice low, "we found a gas can near the foundation, hidden in some bushes. This wasn't an accident." I turned, eyes stinging from smoke and rage. "Arson?" Mike nodded slowly. "Signs of accelerant, multiple start points, someone meant it." I stared at the ashes, thinking of Margaret and her expansion plans with Horizon Realty. She wanted my land, but burned my house to get it. I had no proof yet, just a gut feeling from Afghanistan years, that sense of an enemy close but unseen. I started investigating that night. First, I went to Henry Cole. He lived closest, a mile from my land. I knocked on his door at midnight, patrol lights flashing in his yard. Henry answered, white hair mussed, eyes bleary from sleep. "Jack, what's going on?" I told him about the fire. He frowned. "Tonight I heard a car, not the usual trucks around here, more like something fancy. Around 7, but I didn't see anyone." I jotted it down, pulse quickening. Margaret drove a BMW, fancy, unmistakable, but I needed more. Next morning, I returned to the scene with Mike. The wreckage still smoldered, the smell of burnt wood and ash thick. I traced tire tracks near the back trail, deep, fresh, not from fire trucks or my car. I snapped photos, measured, sent them to patrol for analysis. Then I checked the foundation. The gas can sat there, bright red, the cheap kind sold at Pinewood Fuel 5 miles away. No fingerprints, but I found a charred rag nearby, reeking of gasoline. Someone soaked it, lit it, Mike said, pointing to black burn trails from the foundation to the wall. I nodded. brain racing. This wasn't lightning or a stray campfire, this was deliberate, and I knew who had motive, but I didn't jump to conclusions. I called Lisa Monroe, asked if she'd seen anything odd. "No, Jack," she said over the phone, voice worried. "But Margaret came by yesterday, told me to rethink selling my land." I said no, I noted it. Then I met Sam Turner at his farm. He shook his head. "I was in the fields all day, didn't see nothing, but if she burned your place, Jack, I wouldn't be shocked." I thanked him, drove back to the station, mind a mess. Margaret had big plans. My land blocked her spas and cabins. Burning it was the fastest way to force me to sell cheap, leave. I sat at my desk, staring at scene photos. I didn't have hard proof yet, just the gas can, tire tracks, Henry's word, and instinct. But I'm the sheriff, and I've got ways to find truth. Margaret didn't know I'd set up wildlife cameras around my land, small insurance after her trespassing stunt. I opened my laptop, heart pounding, ready to check the footage. If she did it, I'd see, and she'd pay. I sat in the small office at the Pinewood Sheriff's Station, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, laptop in front of me. The lodge's ashes still haunted me, the smell of burnt wood, shattering glass, my dad's bare head crumbling to dust. Margaret Hensley had clear motive. My land stood in the way of her spa and luxury cabin plans with Horizon Realty. The gas can, tire tracks, Henry's story about a fancy car, all pointed to her. But I needed hard proof, something I could take to court, something she couldn't deny. Good thing I'm not a rookie. After Margaret and her suit measured my land, I'd installed wildlife cameras around the property, small ones, hidden in pines and brush, motion-triggered, synced to the cloud. 22 years in the military taught me the best defense is preparation, and now I'd find out if it paid off. I opened the footage folder, hand trembling, not from fear, but anticipation. I fast-forwarded through hours of Smoky Mountains woods, squirrels darting, wind rustling branches, deer nosing the corn I'd left out. Then I saw it, 6:53 p.m. Saturday, before Mike's call about the fire. A figure appeared in the camera's corner, near the back trail. I zoomed in, heart slamming. It was Margaret Hensley, no mistaking it. Blonde curls, brand new camo jacket, holding a red gas can like the one Mike found. She glanced around, sneaky as the world's worst thief, then walked to the lodge's side. The camera caught it all. She poured gas along the oak wall, pulled a rag from her pocket, with her other hand, dipped it in the can, lit it with a cheap lighter. She tossed the rag, flames erupted, light flashing on her face, no remorse, just a smug smile. She stood there a few seconds, watching it spread, then turned and ran back to the trail, vanishing into the dark. I paused the video, staring at her face on the screen, blood rushing to my head. No mask, no hood, she didn't even hide. Margaret thought she was untouchable, that no one would dare touch Pine Crest HOA president. She was wrong. I re-watched, double-checking, then saved the file to a USB and the cloud. No way I'd lose this evidence. I leaned back, breathing hard, anger from Afghanistan rising, the kind I'd locked down when I saw brothers fall. She burned my dad's legacy, the last thing I had of him, and thought she'd walk free, because she carried a clipboard and drove a BMW. Then I remembered a detail. Last week, I'd seen Margaret at Pinewood Surplus, the army supply store near Pinewood Fuel. She was haggling over tactical boots with the cashier, calling them modern forest chic. I'd smirked then, thinking she was playing dress-up. Now I checked the footage footprints, new soles, light, size 8, pressed clear in the soft dirt near the trail. I matched them to Mike's scene photos, perfect fit. She didn't just burn my house, she left her boot prints like a signature, strutting like I'd never catch her. I smirked, not a laugh, but the smirk of a man who knows he's holding the ace. Margaret didn't know I was sheriff, didn't know I had cameras, didn't know I'd learned patience from long nights, stalking enemies. She thought I was just a backwoods guy in an old wooden house, easy to force out after a fire. She'd miscalculated big. I had the footage, boot prints, gas can, Henry's word, enough to nail her for arson. But I wasn't stopping there. I wanted her to pay for everything, fining Henry, threatening Lisa, suing Sam, and that dirty Horizon scheme. I shut the laptop, stood, hands clenched. This wasn't personal anymore, it was justice. Margaret didn't know I was ready, but she'd find out in a way she'd never forget. I stood in the Pinewood Sheriff's Station office, fluorescent lights casting shadows on the papers before me. The footage of Margaret Hensley, pouring gas, lighting my dad's lodge ablaze replayed in my head, her smug smile, the fire glowing on her arrogant face. I could arrest her now for arson, but I wanted more. She didn't just wreck my life, she tormented Henry, threatened Lisa, sued Sam, and plotted to steal our land for Horizon Realty. I wanted her to crash hard, not just for the fire, but for everything she'd done to Pinewood. 22 years in the military taught me to win. You plan, gather ammo, then fire one clean shot. I locked the laptop, slipped the footage USB in my pocket, and got to work. First, I needed to prove Margaret wasn't as innocent as she played. I drove to Pinewood Fuel, the gas station 5 miles from my land, where they sold the red can in the footage. Old man Jim, the owner, recognized me right off. "Jack, heard about the fire, awful stuff," he said, handing me coffee. I nodded, showed him the gas can photo from the scene. "Jim, you ever sell one of these?" He squinted, nodded. "Last week, some blonde lady bought one, cash, said it was for gardening, thought it was odd, didn't ask." I smirked, gardening with gas. I asked Jim to check his security cam. The footage was grainy, but it was Margaret, in her camo jacket, buying the can Friday, a day before the fire. I saved the file, thanked Jim, first piece locked in. Next, I dug into the Pine Crest HOA. I called Linda, the county office clerk, who owed me one after I found her lost cat last year. "Linda, I need Pine Crest HOA bylaws, the official ones," I said. Over the phone, she emailed them in an hour. I opened the file, read close, nothing. Margaret's HOA was never legally filed with the county. I checked the board signatures, all strangers, none matching Pine Crest folks I knew. I called Sam Turner, asked if he'd signed anything for the HOA. "Never," he growled. "She made it up." I dug up last year's county fair roster. Cornbread sign-up had a few matching names. Margaret forged signatures from that, crowned herself president, with no vote, no meeting. Her HOA was a sham, second piece down. I met Henry Cole next morning, brought Rusty Nail coffee to wake him up. "Henry, tell me everything Margaret's done to you," I said, recorder on. He spilled chicken coop fines, lawsuit threats for safety violations, letters demanding $200, though he's not in Pine Crest. "I threw him out," he said, fists tight. "But she kept coming." I noted it, snapped pics of the letters he'd kept. Then I hit Lisa Monroe's place. She sat at her kitchen table, kids playing out back. "She told me to sell my land, or lose my house over the pool," Lisa said, handing me Margaret's threat letter. I photographed it, recorded her, more harassment proof. Sam Turner was my last stop. I swung by his farm, found him fixing a fence. "Margaret sent me this," he said, tossing me a stack, grass height fines, a lawsuit for ruining the view, demanding $300. "I ain't paying, Jack. My land's mine." I snapped pics, logged it. Henry, Lisa, Sam, all outside Pine Crest, but Margaret used her fake HOA to bully them. Third piece set. I got back to the station, laid it all out, fire footage, gas station cam, fake HOA bylaws, fine and threat letters from Henry, Lisa, Sam. I called patrol, had them analyze the scene's tire tracks, matched Margaret's BMW. I had enough for arson, fraud, harassment. But I wanted it airtight. I drove to Pine Crest Park, where Margaret held her meeting last week. I waited till dusk, saw her alone, checking a bulletin board. I walked up, hands in pockets, voice cold. "Margaret, you should stop before it's too late." She turned, smirked. "Jack, you don't get it. I'm saving Pinewood." I locked eyes. "Saving it by burning my house. I know everything." She paled but rallied fast. "You can't prove a thing." I smirked, walked off. She didn't know I had the footage, not yet. I'd let her dig deeper, then pull her fake empire down. I left Pine Crest Park with a smirk, leaving Margaret Hensley, standing there, face pale from my last words. "I know everything." I wanted her nervous, wondering what I had. The fire footage, gas station cam, a mountain of evidence, like the Smoky Peaks. "I'm the sheriff, but I play long game," learned from Afghanistan ambush nights, let the enemy expose their weak spot, and Margaret didn't disappoint. She hit back, wilder than I'd thought. 2 days later, I got an email from Pine Crest HOA, no more paper letters, a mass digital newsletter. Subject, Residents Beware Community Opposition. I opened it, saw a blurry pic of me at Pinewood Fuel, coffee in hand, squinting in the sun. She'd snapped it while I checked the gas can. Below was a long rant. Jack Ramsey, a neighboring resident, is threatening Pine Crest's growth with aggressive and defiant behavior. He refuses to cooperate with property value enhancements, endangering our community. I laughed aggressive. I'd never raised my voice to her. But Margaret didn't stop at slander. She added, "We urge residents to sign a petition to remove Jack Ramsey from his sheriff position for the common good." I smirked. Cute. That afternoon, I drove through Pine Crest, saw her holding an emergency meeting in the park. Folding tables were stacked with clipboards, signs slapped together, "Protect Pine Crest, no room for saboteurs." Margaret stood in the middle, mic in hand, preaching to a small crowd, some curious residents, and a few Horizon Realty strangers. "Jack Ramsey wants to ruin our future," she yelled, pointing toward my land. "He's threatened me, obstructed progress." I parked far, listened, hands gripping the wheel. She didn't know I had the footage. She thought some lies and signatures would take me down. I let her dig, but she wasn't done. Next night, I checked the wildlife cams, not the ones by the burned lodge, but new ones I'd set up on my land's edge after her measuring stunt. Footage rolled. Margaret, in her camo jacket, tape measure in hand, with the Horizon suit. They stood in the ashes, measuring from the burned foundation to the trail. "Need to reappraise," she said, voice clear on the cam's mic. "This spot's perfect for the spa." The suit nodded, scribbled notes. I clenched my jaw. She was appraising the ruins she torched, claiming it for Pine Crest. I saved the file, added it to the pile. Next morning I cruised through Pine Crest on patrol, and saw Margaret in the ashes, arms crossed, suit beside her. I stopped, stepped out, uniform crisp, voice cold. "Margaret, what are you doing on my land?" She turned fake smile on. "Oh Jack, just checking for insurance. This place is a community risk now." I stepped closer, hands in pockets. "Your insurance, or Horizon Realty's?" "I told you, I know everything." She blinked, but rallied. "You're threatening me, Jack. I have rights here." I raised an eyebrow. "What rights?" "Trespassing on private property. I'm ordering you to leave, now, or I arrest you on the spot." The suit glanced at me, mumbled, "I didn't sign up for this," and bolted to the car. Margaret flushed, opened her mouth to yell, but stopped. She saw my eyes, not just annoyance, but the rage I'd held since watching her burn my dad's house on tape. "You'll regret this," she hissed, then stormed off, leaving perfume mixed with ash. I watched her go, knowing she was rattled, but she hadn't quit. Margaret thought I was bluffing, not knowing I had enough to end her game. She was about to push me to the edge, and I was ready to hit back, not with fists but with the law. Margaret Hensley had crossed the line, and I wasn't waiting anymore. After she trespassed in the lodge ashes to appraise for Horizon Realty, I knew it was time to end this. I had it all: footage of her burning the house, Pinewood fuel cam, BMW tire tracks, fake HOA bylaws, fine letters to Henry, Lisa, Sam, a mountain of undeniable proof. I'm Pinewood Sheriff, and I don't just protect my dad's land, I protect this Smoky Mountains community from a clipboard-wielding lunatic. I sat at the station, typed the warrant: arson, fraud, harassment, document forgery, a list long as the road up the ridge. I filed it myself with Judge Harris, the old county judge, who signed it the second he saw Margaret lighting the fire on tape. "Jack," he said, "take her to court." I teamed up with my deputies, Tom and Ellie, planned the arrest for broad daylight, no sneaking. I wanted her to face consequences in public. We knew she'd be at an HOA meeting in her Pine Crest mansion's front yard. Another protect the community rant against me. I drove the patrol car up, Tom and Ellie behind, sirens off for surprise. Her yard was decked out, folding tables, clipboards, Pine Crest flags flapping, like a fair, but no one was smiling. Margaret stood in the center, mic in hand, yelling Jack Ramsey's a threat. We need action. I stepped out, uniform sharp, warrant in hand. The crowd hushed as I called out, Margaret Hensley. She turned face flashing surprise, then contempt. Jack, you dare interrupt me. I walked up, voice steady. Margaret Hensley, you're under arrest for arson, fraud, harassment and document forgery. I read each charge, slow, so everyone heard. Her face went from smug to panicked. You can't arrest me, I'm HOA president. I pulled the warrant from my pocket. This says I can. Tom and Ellie stepped up, cuffed her. She thrashed, screaming about lawyers and rights, then tripped into her rose bushes, drawing laughs from the crowd. I looked around. Henry Cole sat on a lawn chair, clapping slow. Lisa Monroe stood nearby, hugging her kids, smiling faint. We loaded her in the car, sirens blaring as we drove off. The trial came fast. I made sure everything was airtight, no loopholes for Margaret to slip through. I worked with the prosecutor, handing over all the evidence, the fire footage, gas station cam, boot prints, fine letters, fake bylaws. On court day, the Pinewood County courtroom wasn't packed, but the key people were there. Henry with his chicken coop photos, Lisa with her threat letter, Sam with his grass lawsuit papers. I sat in the front row, uniform crisp, not gloating, just waiting for justice. Margaret walked in, gray suit, hair still curled, flanked by a cheap lawyer who looked ready to bolt. She glared at me, defiant, but I saw her hands tremble. The prosecutor laid it out. Footage of Margaret pouring gas, lighting the fire played on a big screen. The room went dead silent. Henry muttered, "Crazy hag." Lisa covered her mouth. Margaret's lawyer stammered, "A misunderstanding. She was clearing weeds. It caught fire by accident." But when the gas station footage rolled, her buying the can, smirking at Jim, and the boot prints matched the scene, the lawyer shut up. I testified, voice steady. I found the gas can, tire tracks, and footage. She burned my house to force me to sell to Horizon Realty. Margaret shouted, "Lies. I was saving Pinewood." Judge Harris banged the gavel, demanded silence. Henry, Lisa, Sam took the stand one by one. Henry told of the coop fines, Lisa of the threats to lose her home, Sam of the grass lawsuit, all outside Pine Crest, all from Margaret's fake HOA. The prosecutor wrapped up the HOA bylaws, weren't legal. Margaret self-appointed her power, used it to harass and steal land. Her lawyer couldn't counter. The footage was too clear, the evidence too much. Judge Harris looked at Margaret, voice deep. "You abused trust, harmed a community, and burned someone's property for personal gain." Verdict: 7 years probation, community service, $1.2 million restitution, the lodge's value plus emotional damages. Margaret slumped in her chair, face ashen. I walked out of court, no cheering, just relieved. The Pinewood Gazette ran it next day. Fake HOA president, sentenced for arson. Margaret lost, but I wasn't done. I wanted her whole fake empire to crumble for good. The trial ended. Margaret Hensley was cuffed and led out of the Pinewood courtroom, but I knew the story wasn't over. I wanted her fake empire, that Pine Crest HOA she used to bully me. Henry, Lisa, Sam to collapse completely, no chance of rising again. The 7-year probation, community service, and $1.2 million restitution hit hard, but Margaret was like a weed. If you didn't rip out the roots, she'd grow back. I sat at the Smoky Mountains Sheriff's Station that night, reading the Pinewood Gazette, fake HOA president, sentenced for arson. Folks buzzed about it, at Rusty Nail, the county fair, even Pinewood Fuel. Margaret was a laughingstock now, but I wanted to make sure she never returned. Her insurance wouldn't cover intentional arson, so that $1.2 million had to come from her pocket. I heard from Linda, the county clerk, that the bank foreclosed on her shiny BMW and Pine Crest mansion a week after the trial. The house, her power symbol with white columns and manicured lawn, went up for sale, but no buyers. A price-slashed sign sagged out front. Grass grew wild, and the Horizon Realty guys who'd backed her now dodged her like the plague. I drove by once, saw dark windows, no more lights or Margaret yelling into a mic. She lost everything: house, car, reputation. But I knew she was stubborn enough to try clawing back. I stood there, right on the edge of my field in Pinewood County, Smoky Mountains, watching Margaret Hensley's $220,000 wedding tent sway in the wind like some royal pavilion, the music blared, deafening, while the guests in high heels stomped my young corn sprouts like it was a dance floor. Margaret, the Pine Crest HOA tyrant, didn't even bother asking permission before taking over my land for her granddaughter's wedding. All I wanted was peace, but then her chef strutted up, shamelessly saying, "Hey buddy, mind moving that tractor, it's ruining the aesthetic." Aesthetic? On my land? That's when I'd had enough. I didn't say a word, just calmly walked over, hand flipping the switch. The manure spreader roared to life, flinging dung everywhere. Guests screamed and scattered, heels caked in muck, white dresses turned into abstract art. The chef stood frozen, face pale as death. I looked at the chaos and thought, how did it come to this? This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. I'm Jack Ramsey, sheriff of this little county, and the story behind the stinking wedding tent is crazier than you'd guess. It involves a $1 million hunting lodge my dad built with his own hands, an HOA hag who didn't know who I was, and a war Margaret never saw coming. Let's rewind a bit. I'll start from the beginning, from the moment she waltzed into my life with her clipboard and fake smile, right up until everything went up in flames. Trust me, you'll want to hear it all. Okay, now you've seen me turn Margaret's wedding into a stinking mess, but to understand why I did it, and why it wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing, we need to rewind. I'm Jack Ramsey, sheriff of Pinewood County, Smoky Mountains, a quiet place with deep woods, winding back roads, and folks who wave at each other even if they don't much like one another. I'm not the type to stir up trouble, but I'm also not the kind to let anyone walk all over me. 22 years in the Marines taught me how to stay calm when everything's blowing up, literally and figuratively. I've been in Afghanistan, living in dust and gunfire, learning to build shelters from nothing, spotting enemies from a shadow's flicker. But nothing prepared me for Margaret Hensley and her damn HOA. I came back to Pinewood 7 years ago, after my dad Tom Ramsey had his first stroke. He was everything to me, the man who taught me to shoot, tie a fly, and survive a Smoky Mountains winter with a fireplace and a knife. He passed last spring, leaving me 50 acres, and the hunting lodge he built by hand over 30 years. Calling it a lodge might not do it justice. It's worth $1 million, not just for the red oak he felled from the forest, or the stone foundation he laid brick by brick, but for what it holds. Inside, the walls are lined with trophies, a black bear head he shot when I was 10, deer antlers from my first hunt, and an old shotgun he left me with to Jack, keep the fire burning, carved into the stock. He used to say that house was his church, where he found peace among the pines and the wind. Standing on the porch, hearing owls hoot in the night, I finally got what he meant, a legacy, a place to remember that family and land are worth defending. The lodge sits on the edge of Pinewood, near the Smoky Nature Preserve, far from the new neighborhood folks like Margaret are trying to turn into a city slicker's playground. It's not just wood and nails, it's my dad's sweat, the days he hauled logs in his old truck, the nights he sat sharpening knives by the fire, telling me bear hunting stories, or how to survive when snow blocked the roads. I still remember the winter, when I was 12, when he took me up the mountain, showed me how to read deer tracks in the snow, then sat by a fire under the porch roof, eating venison roasted on sticks. "Jack," he said, "this land's yours, but you've got to hold it. No one gets to take it." I nodded, not knowing that 20 years later, I'd have to fight to keep that promise. After the military, I didn't plan on being sheriff. I just wanted to come back, fix up the lodge, hunt some deer, live quiet like Dad. But Pinewood needed someone to keep order after the old sheriff retired, and with my experience, they voted me in. I liked the job, low drama, mostly handling drunks or lost cows. Folks here know me, trust me, and I try to keep things easy. But then Margaret Hensley showed up, and everything changed. The lodge isn't just a house, it's the last thing my dad left me, the place I found myself after years of war. I've lived through bombs, lost brothers, but never thought I'd have to defend my dad's legacy from an HOA hag with a clipboard and a BMW. Margaret didn't know that. She saw the lodge as a thorn in her aesthetic plans, not knowing how much it's worth to me, in money and blood. She didn't know who I was, didn't know I'd learned patience from freezing desert nights, or how I could wait, watch and strike when the time was right. When she had that wedding Leon hike wedding tent set up on my land, she lit the fuse on a war she couldn't win. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Before the tent, before the manure flew, there was a day she knocked on my door, and that's where it all started. It began on a Saturday morning, while I was fixing the lodge's porch roof, the one my dad patched by hand every rainy season. I heard gravel crunching under tires, not the rusty pickup sound of Pinewood locals, but the sleek hum of a brand new BMW. I looked up, saw Margaret Hensley step out, blonde hair in perfect curls, wearing a business suit like she'd jumped from a Nordstrom catalog into the Smoky Mountains. She held a clipboard like it was a crown, and the smile on her face was faker than a politician's promises. I wiped my hands on my jeans, figuring she'd gotten lost from the Pine Crest subdivision half a mile away, the new place popping up with boxy houses and lawns trimmed like golf courses. Margaret wasn't lost. She marched straight to my porch, heels clacking on the gravel path like a countdown to trouble. "Hi there," she chirped, her voice so sweet it gave me goosebumps. "I'm Margaret Hensley, president of the Pine Crest HOA. We've had some complaints about your structure." She stressed structure, like my dad's lodge was trash, someone dumped on the land. I raised an eyebrow, set my hammer down. "You mean the house my family built before your neighborhood had a name on the map?" She didn't flinch, just flashed a tight smile, the kind folks use when they're selling you something you don't want. "Well, yes, untreated wood, that exposed firewood pile from the road, it doesn't fit the community aesthetic." I looked around. Pine forest stretched to the mountains, not a soul within half a mile except the occasional deer. "What community?" I asked. "The squirrels," Margaret huffed, pulled a stack of papers from her clipboard, handed them to me like a flyer. "These are the HOA guidelines. Section 6 covers structure visibility and landscaping. You should read it." I didn't take the papers, just crossed my arms. "I'm not in your HOA." Her smile cracked a bit, but she rallied fast. "You're right next to it, Jack. It affects our property values. I just want to keep things nice." I'd heard about Margaret from Pinewood gossip. She'd moved from Charlotte after a nasty divorce. Ex-husband was a big-shot banker who ditched her for someone younger. She bought the biggest house in Pine Crest, drove that shiny BMW, never meant for gravel roads, and decided to turn this corner of the Smoky Mountains into a mini version of the fancy suburb she'd left. The Pine Crest HOA was her brainchild, a way to wield power and slap rules on folks she thought were backward. I'd seen her at the general store once, arguing with the old clerk over no organic milk. I didn't care then, she was just a loud housewife living a few hundred yards from my land. But now, standing on my porch, she wasn't a joke anymore. "Miss Hensley," I said, voice steady like when I'm breaking up drunks at the bar, "this land's been in my family since 1948. This house was here before your HOA. Unless you've got court papers, it's none of your business." I figured that'd end it, that she'd drive off with her clipboard and her aesthetic dreams. But Margaret wasn't the type to back off. She pursed her lips, eyes flashing a challenge. "We'll see," she said, then turned on her heel, leaving a whiff of pricey perfume mixed with forest air. I watched her BMW disappear, knowing it wouldn't be the last I'd see of her. And I was right. Margaret Hensley was just getting started, and she had no idea who she was picking a fight with. I figured after that doorstep visit, Margaret Hensley would get bored and slink back to Pine Crest with her clipboard and her aesthetic fantasies. But I underestimated how stubborn a woman fueled by Starbucks and $1 million divorce settlement could be. A week later, I was driving home from the sheriff's station when I spotted plastic signs along the gravel road to my land. "Pine Crest HOA residents only," they read, bold and laminated, staked deep like someone thought this was an official border. One blocked the trail I hunt on, another half covered the wooden sign my dad carved when I was a kid. Ramsey Hollow. I yanked them all out, tossed them in the fire pit out back, watched the flames eat through Margaret's fake HOA logo. Ashes floated up, and I thought, done. But the next morning, they were back like weeds after rain. I stood there, coffee in hand, staring at the fresh signs, and knew Margaret wasn't playing. She wanted control, not just of Pine Crest, but my land too, even though it sat outside her HOA line by a solid 15 feet. I don't like confrontation. 22 years in the military taught me war's only worth it when there's no other way, but I'm not the type to let anyone stomp on what my dad left me. So I went to town, hit the county office, checked the deeds. It was crystal clear. The Ramsey families owned this land since 1948, before Pine Crest was a dot on a map. Margaret's HOA had no claim here. A few days later, a crisp white envelope showed up in the mail, Pine Crest HOA stamped in gold lettering. Inside was a list of violations: unapproved structure the lodge, unsightly firewood pile, and get this, attracting wildlife, because I leave some corn out for deer near the woods. Each came with a $50 fine, plus a vague threat of legal action if I didn't pay in 10 days. I sat at my kitchen table, reading line by line, and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the gall. I'm not in the HOA, never was, never will be, but Margaret clearly thought she could bully me with paper and ink. I called her, number pulled from the Pinewood directory. "Miss Hensley," I said when she picked up, voice syrupy like our first chat. "What's this?" She played dumb. "Oh Jack, it's just procedure. We have to maintain community standards. You're so close to Pine Crest." So, I cut her off. "I'm not in Pine Crest. My land's been ours since before you got here. Send more of these, and I'll call it harassment." She went quiet for a second, then chuckled. "Jack, I'm just trying to help. Property values matter to all of us." I hung up, knowing her help meant grabbing control of what's not hers. But Margaret didn't stop. The next week, I saw her car, that glossy BMW, parked near my property line, her standing there with a guy in a cheap suit, pointing at the lodge, like they were sizing it up. I walked out, shovel in hand from the back garden. "What are you doing on my land?" I asked. She turned, not a hint of nerves. "Oh Jack, just checking. We might need to report this structure to the county. It's unsafe." I stepped closer, close enough she backed up. "You're trespassing. Leave, or I call the patrol." The suit guy muttered something, and bolted to the car. Margaret tilted her chin. "You don't get it, Jack. I'm trying to improve this place." She drove off, leaving me with the feeling this was just the start. I was wrong to think she was all talk. Margaret didn't just want to improve, she wanted to own. She didn't know I was the sheriff, didn't know I'd learned patience from long nights in Afghanistan, and sure as hell didn't know I wouldn't let anyone touch my dad's legacy without a fight. But back then, I just wanted peace, a mistake I'd fix soon enough. Margaret Hensley might have thought she was tangling with just me, but she didn't know that in Pinewood you don't mess with one person, you mess with the whole damn community. This county's the kind of place where folks live slow, know each other's names, and'll bring you a pan of cornbread when your heater dies mid-Smoky Mountains winter. I love that quiet. It reminds me of sitting with Dad by the fire pit, hearing him spin tales of bear hunts, or the flood of '72. As sheriff, I keep Pinewood steady, settling fence spats, finding lost dogs, or hauling drunks home from the town's only bar, Rusty Nail. Folks here trust me, not because of the badge, but because I'm Jack Ramsey, the kid who fished Pine Creek with his dad, now grown and guarding this place. But when Margaret and her Pine Crest HOA started flexing, I realized I wasn't her only target. She was hassling others too, folks who didn't have the time or fight to push back. First was Henry Cole, a 75-year-old vet, living a mile from my land. Henry did Vietnam, now raises chickens, and fixes old cars in his yard. One day, I dropped by with some hunting ammo I wasn't using, found him tearing up an HOA letter. "That Margaret fined me $100 for my chicken coop," he growled, hands shaky from age and anger. "Says it smells and ruins the view. That coop was here before she ever set foot in this county." I looked at it, clean, sturdy, no stink but hay. Henry's not in Pine Crest, but his place is close enough for Margaret to target. Then there's Lisa Monroe, a single mom and county hospital nurse, raising 2 kids in a little house off Pinewood Road. I ran into her at the county fair, the event where the whole town gathers for fried chicken and shooting contests. Lisa pulled me aside, showed me an HOA letter, violation, unapproved kiddie pool. It was a $20 plastic pool she got for her kids to splash in come summer. I can't pay a fine, Jack, she said, eyes red. I'm not even in Pine Crest, how's she doing this? I patted her shoulder, promised to look into it. Lisa's the type who works herself ragged for her kids, she doesn't need grief from a self-appointed HOA queen. Last was Sam Turner, a corn and cattle farmer 2 miles from my place. Sam's an old friend of Dad's, helped him haul logs for the lodge. I swung by his farm one evening, found him slamming his fist on an outdoor table, a stack of Margaret's letters beside him. She's suing me over grass taller than 6 inches, he said, voice rough with rage. Says I've got to mow it all, or pay $200. This is farmland, Jack, tall grass is for the cows. Sam's not in Pine Crest, but his field butts up to the subdivision, and Margaret saw that as her in. I started seeing the pattern. Margaret wasn't just after me, she was after anyone who didn't fit her vision for Pinewood. She wanted to turn this place into a Charlotte knockoff, with flat lawns and cookie-cutter houses, no matter who'd been here, how long or how they lived. I love Pinewood for its realness, the fair with wood smoke in the air, early morning hunts, when fog hugs the trees, laughs at Rusty Nail over some tired old joke. Margaret didn't get that. To her we were hicks needing fixing. I went home that night, sat on the lodge porch, staring out at the pines. I thought about Henry, Lisa, Sam, folks living on sweat and kindness, now bullied by a clipboard-wielding nag. I thought about Dad, who taught me land and community are worth defending. Margaret didn't know I was sheriff, didn't know I could dig through records, make calls, and push back with the law. But I didn't want to play that card, not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go, let her dig her own hole deeper. And she didn't disappoint. Margaret's next move was bigger than I'd guessed. I'd figured Margaret Hensley was just a loudmouth with a clipboard and dreams of turning Pinewood into a city folks resort, but I was wrong. She didn't just want to find Henry's coop or Lisa's pool, she had a bigger plan, and I was the last obstacle in her way. I found out on a Wednesday afternoon, stopping by Rusty Nail for a coffee after my shift. Sam Turner was at the bar, gripping a Budweiser, face red with fury. Jack, he said, voice hoarse, Margaret's holding a meeting at Pine Crest tonight. Word is she wants to expand the subdivision, my land, your land, all of it. I frowned, my land's not for sale. Sam shrugged, she doesn't care, some suit from a real estate company's with her too. I don't trust rumors, but in Pinewood they're half true more often than not. I drove by Pine Crest after work, parked under a pine a few hundred yards from Margaret's place. A crowd was gathered in the little park across from her mansion, about 20 people, some familiar faces from the subdivision, some strangers I'd never seen. Margaret stood in the middle, in a loud red business dress, holding a mic like a TV host. Next to her was the suit Sam mentioned, tall, skinny, slicked back hair, clutching a fat stack of papers. I rolled down my window, eavesdropped. Pine Crest will be the jewel of the Smoky Mountains, Margaret boomed, voice carrying. But to do it we need to expand, sparse walking trails, luxury cabins. Horizon Realty's agreed to fund it, if we all pitch in. She pointed toward my land, Sam's and a few other acres outside Pine Crest's line. These backward patches are holding progress back. Horizon Realty, that name rang a bell. I'd seen their billboards in Knoxville, luxury vacation homes for every family. They snatch up cheap land, build resorts, then sell them sky high to city folks wanting nature, without getting dirty. Margaret didn't just want control, she wanted to steal our land, turn it into a playground for outsiders, and line her pockets with Horizon cash. I'm the sheriff, I know the law, my land's private, no one can force a sale without a court order. But Margaret didn't care about law, she cared about power. That night, I sat on the lodge porch, watching the pines fade into dark. I thought about Dad, who felled every oak for this place, who taught me land's a root no one gets to rip up. Margaret wanted to flatten it, replace it with spas and paved trails. The thought made me sick. But I didn't have proof yet, just Sam's word, and what I'd overheard. I decided to watch. 2 days later, I saw Margaret's car parked near Sam's land, her and the suit walking his field, measuring something with a tape. I called Sam. What's she doing? Sam roared over the phone. Measuring my land, says it's boundary checks for Horizon. I ran them off, but she's not scared. I knew Margaret wouldn't stop with Sam or Henry, or Lisa, she'd come for me next, and she did. On Friday I got a letter from Pine Crest, not a fine this time, but a community notice. It said the HOA planned to expand oversight to neighboring areas to enhance property values, with a map marking my land, Sam's and a few other acres. At the bottom was Margaret's signature, scrawled like a president's. I smirked. It had no legal weight, just a scare tactic. But then I heard from Lisa. Margaret had gone to her house, saying if she didn't cooperate with the expansion, she'd be sued over the kiddie pool and lose her home. Lisa cried over the phone. Jack, I can't fight her. I clenched my jaw. Margaret wasn't just a loudmouth, she was a threat. She thought me, Sam Henry, Lisa were just hicks she could bully, not knowing I was the sheriff, not knowing I'd learned to strategize from ambush nights in Afghanistan. I wouldn't let her steal my dad's land, or ruin my neighbors' lives. But I needed proof, and I was about to get it, in a way Margaret never saw coming. Margaret Hensley had upped her game, but I didn't expect her to go this far. It all broke open on a Saturday night, while I was at the Pinewood Sheriff's Station, finishing a report on Sam Turner's lost cow. The phone rang. Mike Evans, County Fire Chief, voice urgent. Jack, you need to get here now, your hunting lodge is burning. I dropped my pen, heart pounding. Burning how? Mike hesitated. Not sure, but it's big. We're on the way. I jumped in the patrol car, flipped the siren, sped down Smoky Mountains gravel roads, mind racing. The lodge, $1 million in oak and memories with my dad, couldn't burn, not by chance.